morning. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Beach House Park for a very, very special occasion. We've got some beautiful forget-me-nots here. It's great to see so many people. This is our time for reflection, to remember loved ones lost during the COVID pandemic, whether or not they had dementia, but specifically those with dementia. For those who don't know, my name's Bob Smitherman. I am the Worthing Town Crier, but I'm also very proud to be chairman of Dementia Friendly Worthing, an organisation that was set up a few years ago with the three Mayor's Charities when I was Mayor of Worthing. And I'm really proud now we have Lindsay as our pay coordinator, we have an amazing steering group, and we have our own dementia hub, following on the legacy from that mayoral year. Over 21,000 people passed away in West Sussex during the pandemic, which meant that many family carers were caring 24/7 with little or no support. It is no surprise to hear that carers' stress was an all-time high during this time, and it was an extremely emotional and draining time for all concerned. The Reflections Project has been developed through West Sussex County Council and the NHS Joint Commissioning Dementia Team. The End of Life Task and Finish Group wanted to plan a memorial for those who passed during COVID-19. The reflection sculptures are 200 steel forget-me-nots that you can see positioned here in Beach House Park this morning. Were commissioned, made by Chai Africa, a local Chichester business. The sculpture will be toured around West Sussex during this week, and they've also been to Crawley, Horsham and Chichester and Henfield, and we're very proud to have it here in our premier park here in Worthing, to enable the communities to come together, share stories and memories and photos and poems of loved ones who have passed during the pandemic. And those memories will be collated into remembrance books that will be located around the county and along small clusters of forget-me-nots, and we'll be hosting some of those at the Dementia Hub. And I brought with me this morning a photograph which I'll be placing in the jar later on of Nora Fisher, former councillor and mayoress when I was Mayor of Worthing. Nora sadly passed away in 2020, right at the very early part of the pandemic. Sadly, there was unable to be hardly anybody at the funeral. I wasn't even allowed to drive from my home in Goring to see the cortege drive through her home village of Tarring. So I was doing a Facebook Live, which is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. So that's my memory of Nora. We had an absolutely fantastic 13 months as Mayor and Mayoress of Worthing. And my thoughts are with Nora today. I'm now going to ask Martha just to come and say a few words about the project before I hand over to our chaplain.
So really, this project came about probably about well over a year ago. I think we started talking about it, and how could we remember people that had died during COVID. And I can remember very early on having a conversation with one of our carers. His wife, unfortunately, had a fall, went into hospital just at the start of the pandemic, and then was discharged into into a care home. And he knew that things weren't going to be the same as they'd always been. He knew that his wife wasn't going to come home. And he was very fortunate that the care home allowed him to go in when his wife was dying, and he was able to be there as she passed. And he knew, and he says now, he's very thankful that he was able to do that when he knew so many other people couldn't do that. But he said to me, probably about 3 or 4 days after his wife Dolly had died, "Martha, one day we'll have a memorial service for her." And that kind of stuck in my head, and that was the seed really that kind of started this whole memorial project off. And then a little bit later down the line, one of my colleagues, one of my team, Jane, passed away very suddenly. We didn't know that she was poorly. We kind of think she knew she was poorly, but she hadn't told us. And for me, professionally, that was one of the hardest things I think I've ever had to do, is to tell my teams that their colleague, their friend, she wouldn't be coming back to work, that she'd passed away. And to remember her, we decided that we would plant some bulbs, some spring bulbs in her honour. She loved spring flowers. She was born in May, and she loved to see the flowers coming out. So we planted some bulbs called Our Jane. And then the idea really took seed that actually we need to plant some flowers. We need a memorial of flowers for all of the people that we know that we've lost through COVID. And the forget-me-nots represent dementia. They're a recognised symbol for people within the dementia communities. So that's really how the forget-me-nots came here today. They've been designed and made by a company called Chai Africa. So they're based in Chichester, but also a lot of the work is done out in Zimbabwe. And Joe, who is the manager of the company, his grandma actually comes to us at Sage House in Tangmere, and his mum gets wayfinding support as well. So for him, it's a really poignant project that he's able to design and produce all of these forget-me-nots when he knows that, you know, he has a relative as well with dementia. So it's very meaningful to him. So I just thank you all for being here today. It's a real pleasure to see so many people, and just to thank Lindsay, because I know she's put in a lot of hard work for today. So thank you, Lindsay. We really appreciate that. You know, the vision that we started with that was so small has actually come into something, and it's really massive. So a big thank you to Lindsay, and I shall pass you back to Bob. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce a very special person to us at Dementia Friendly Worthing, and for me personally, our very own Worthing Dementia Friendly chaplain, my very good friend and the one and only, Reverend Dr. Hazel Sherman, to lead us in a few prayers, and then we'll pass over to a few people I know who've got poems and readings to do as well. Reverend Hazel.
Seems like I've been promoted. In that first period of lockdown, we seemed to have been transported to a different world. I was in the privileged position of leading some of those sad services with no more than 6 people present, watching a tiny representation, but many, many more, sometimes hundreds, watching on live stream. But then, for a while, before we forgot, we seemed to remember what it was like to go out of our way to be kind. Hearses drove along neighbourhood roads, and friends and acquaintances stood on their garden paths and reached out as we passed. It was my privilege in those first months to be where many of you couldn't be. And now, in times of remembrance, it sometimes seems as if there's a hierarchy of grief, but we know there isn't. I'm going to read just a couple of verses which are heard in so many different contexts. They come from a prophet. He happens to write within the Christian scriptures, but he could as easily, I think, have been writing in the classic scriptures of so many faiths, because prophets speak what is unimaginable and draw hope from it. He's speaking to a whole people who can find no hope, but he speaks in words which make sense to us because they're everyday. The Lord has forsaken me. My Lord has forgotten me. And the prophet replies, can a woman forget her nursing child or show no compassion for the child of her womb? Even these may forget, yet I will not forget you. See, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. And I think those are words which may resonate with many of us who have cared for loved ones who've lived and died with dementia. So, a prayer, a thought. Lord, where words are not enough, but are what we have, when we want to remember the beautiful hidden moments with those we have loved, when we want to celebrate the joyous times with those who have shared all they have and are with us, when we know we have wounded with words, when for a moment compassion has been overcome by exhaustion, we know that words are part of being human, but not the whole. And when words fail us, or jumble up together as sounds we can't follow, Lord, bring signs of goodness, signs of hope from all the treasures we carry. Gather up the goodness in what we have known together with those who remain with us unseen but present in our hearts. And help us to know that none of us are lost, and that you know and understand the best and the worst of our times and places. Amen.